because as Harrison pointed out, it's not practical to go around and give people these brain scans or whatever. And for all we know, brain scans are not effective. I mean, I don't think a brain scan is the answer. So what they did then was they began to convert the concept of psychopathy to something that's cool, something that's desirable, somebody who's fearless, somebody who's got everything on top. He can go out there and he can rape, pillage, kill, and plunder and come out on top. I mean, geez, you look back through history, and that's where I spend most of my time reading history. Nearly every leader who is commemorated with statuary and paeans of praise and honorifics and is remembered by their country as being, their liberator or their hero or their great general or their great emperor or whatever, was a freaking psychopath, for God's sakes. I mean, our culture makes heroes out of monsters. That's the problem, and they're doing it again today. They're making heroes out of monsters. Our whole a trend towards civilizing humanity that began sometime in the Renaissance, where we began to look at human values, got twisted and corrupted. And now we're on the verge of entering a virtual dark age because monsters are being proclaimed as the heroes of our age.
Absolutely. That's a very good point. And it kind of speaks to the what we were talking about before, about how the ordinary population is psychopathized or psychopathologized, whichever way, polarized, if you like, largely by, I mean, Harrison was talking about how just the ideals of the psychopaths, if they're in positions of power, will spread throughout the infrastructure of a country and the, schools, universities, media, everything. But the other aspect, one of the defining traits of a psychopath is lies, is pathological lying, repeated lies over everything and anything. And obviously that's a very good way to, it's not just a matter of them spreading these ideals and people adopting them, but rather that people are lied to on a repeated basis. And you have decent, good people who believe the lies. I mean, if you're a really good liar, it's probably pretty easy to lie to someone and have them believe it, if you do it repeatedly and with such, charm and superficial glibness and all these other traits, this self-assuredness. So,
what was it Hitler said, that the bigger the lie, the more people you'll get to believe it?
Yeah.
It's the same principle today.
Yeah.
And speaking of which, Harrison, do you want to kick in anything on this? Because I want to mention Mark Bloch, but if you have something to say first, go for it.
Well, I just want to say that when you have the psychopaths in power, one of the points that Andrew Lobachevsky makes in his book is that psychopaths know that they're different, and that they know that if people knew about psychopaths, if people had all this psychological knowledge, that would be the way of diagnosing the problem. So they know that if the mass majority of people knew about psychopaths and could recognize the traits and could recognize them in their leaders, then they'd be out of a job, they'd be out of positions of power. So what they do is that they actually engage in this disinformation, these lies that Joe's talking about. So they will actually, like you said, what we were seeing in the years after you published your articles was this idea, to conflate the subjects of sociopathy and psychopathy, and to kind of make a muddle or a mess of the issue so that people wouldn't understand it. Now that didn't exactly work because, I think because like the internet and social media and just the way that people can be connected, information could be shared a lot more readily and a lot more easily than it could be in the past. So we've got this information available. So then the tactic changes so that it's not so much that the idea of psychopathy is confused. It's just that it starts to be something that's cool, right? So we get people, characters like Dexter, or young boys who read comic books. They like the really tough characters that can go to war and kill people and then come back and just not feel anything. like, it's like, oh, he's like Wolverine, he's really badass, right? That's what I hear kids saying. And so, but the thing is that it's tapping into something, I think, about human psychology, is that normal people feel fear and they feel anxiety, and people don't like that. So when they see a psychopath who has none of those traits and who appears just totally cool and able to get through anything, a part of them, of a normal person will say, wow, that would be really great, if only I couldn't feel, all these negative emotions and this anxiety, and if I could just get over myself.
Here's the problem, though. The problem is that with the conflation and the manipulation of the definition of psychopathy, what they've done is they've attributed characteristics to people that, when looked at in a certain light, would be positive. Oh, they're charismatic. Oh, they're daring. Oh, they
charming.
Take risks. They're charming. It's like, all of these sort of attributes, when they're described this way, who wouldn't want to be charming and charismatic? That's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. I think that the problem is that the emphasis is taken off the essential core concept of the complete and total lack of conscience and the incredible desire and ability to manipulate and destroy and harm other people and on a massive scale, and the desire to do it. It's just, those are the things that I consider to be like core to psychopathy, not that they're charismatic or even necessarily that they're glib.
Well, that brings up another problem. The problem is that a true hero could be charismatic. He could be brave. He, of course, would feel fear, but he would be like, like the old saying says, courage is not never feeling afraid. It's feeling afraid and doing what needs to be done anyway. And, I'm reminded of, there's kind of a silly movie that we watched a few years ago, and I'm sure everybody is familiar with it. It was called V, but it's not the V for Vendetta one. It's V about the aliens that came to Earth. It was like a TV special over several.
V miniseries.
Anyhow, they had this young girl, little blonde girl, doctor or a scientist of some sort, who somehow ended up being the leader of the resistance against the aliens. And at one point, she's obliged to fix a leaking pipe or for a water system, and she begins to cry because she doesn't know how to do anything. And why does everybody keep looking at me to be the leader? Why does everybody keep asking me what to do, and so forth? And then an older woman says, well, you don't have to tell people that you don't know what to do. You don't have to know everything. Just act like you do, because they're looking to you for leadership. And the thing is that she had this like inner core of righteousness, of strength, and just knowing what was right, and that something was right, and she wasn't gonna give an inch about it. So when somebody is like that, they can be extremely courageous. They can be extremely charismatic. They can do lots of things, and these are the kinds of traits that psychopaths emulate and mimic.
Right.
Because remember, a psychopath wears a mask of sanity, and the really good ones you can't tell because they keep their filth and the ugliness and the darkness and the black hole inside them well hidden, and they constantly live a lie. They live a constant pretense.
And I would point out that I don't really see the sort of like the valiant war hero who goes and shoots 50 people and throws himself off into lines. I don't necessarily think that person's a psychopath in that context. A lot of people think that just because someone's like a soldier or something, that they must be some sort of psychopathic killer. I don't really take with that. I think that psychopaths pretend to be those things. They pretend to be brave. They pretend to be fearless. They pretend all those things with their words, but actually when you put them on the field of battle, they're not any of those things. They
don't give a hoot.
They don't give a shit. The problem is not being charismatic. The problem is not even being manipulative. The problem is why you do things. And psychopaths always do things for self-interest. They don't want to benefit their group. Now, if you tell a lie, if you're a leader and you tell a lie that's going to help people get through a difficult time, then that's a whole different story than a person who tells a lie because they want to get something for themselves. So.
What do you think, Harrison?
Yeah, I think that Jason made the most important point about this, is that all of these traits that we look at as being positive in psychopaths, and Kevin Dutton's book on why psychopaths, why psychopaths have traits that are good or that we might want to emulate. It's because this complete lack of real psychological knowledge, where we see that all those traits are things that real humans can come to without being psychopaths, and they're not even the real traits of psychopaths. They're the real things that psychopaths just emulate or fake. And so what they've done is kind of conflate the issue, where we've identified these traits that can be really positive and that real leaders do have, like courage and bravery and the ability to get through difficult situations. And by identifying them with psychopaths, the psychopaths get off fine. But what they're really missing, what people are really missing, is that when you have a psychopath, you might have all of these traits that resemble good things, but at the core of it, you have this total darkness, this total destructive nature that will just consume another person. And you can't have one without the other in a psychopath. Like with a psychopath, that is always there. So when you're trying to emulate a psychopath, or you think psychopaths are cool, that's what you're emulating, and that's what it comes down to. If you want to emulate good traits, you can find those good traits in good people. They're not essential features of psychopaths. So the whole thing... Yeah, go on.
I was going to say, because you did mention some things like comic book characters, and I mean, I know there are some comic book characters who are kind of bad. I wouldn't say that Wolverine really is. I think no. Some storylines he is, but since I'm a Wolverine fan, I'm going to have to defend him a little bit. Or even, say for instance, Johnny the Homicidal Maniac.
Yeah.
And, that's a real sort of psychopathic kind of character, or intended to be, or Hannibal Lecter, right? And these are media characters that are portrayed to be psychopathic, but actually, in the end, they're not. They follow a very heroic pattern. They just kind of end up doing bad things coincidentally, and so they're misrepresented as psychopaths. Calling Wolverine a psychopath is actually not fair, because he is extremely brave and he's extremely caring for various other characters. Like in the cartoon, he was very caring for like Jubilee and stuff like that. That's not psychopathic. He's not psychopathic. Hannibal Lecter is not a psychopath by like any stretch of the imagination. He's like a composite hero character who does serial killer-like things, but that's only like the gimmick of the movie. Whereas the character Hannibal Lecter is actually he's like a gentleman in a certain sense, and all of his killings seem to always be portrayed as having something to do with revenge against people, or the punishment of these sort of like people that are around him. Like when he feeds the victim to a whole bunch of posh, sort of wannabes and stuff like that. So I mean, those kind of characters, when they're represented, I mean, I haven't seen Dexter, so I don't know, but the way it sounds actually is that he's kind of like the coincidental psychopath. It's like, here we've created a hero character that's going to go on a hero's journey. Oh, and by the way, every once in a while he stops and kills people. Mm-hmm. So that's like a misrepresentation of psychopathy, because a real psychopath is to me like this wheedling. It's like the Cypher character. I think the Cypher character in The Matrix is kind of like the perfect psychopath. He's always running around in the background, talking to people, trying to manipulate things, feeling them out, like when he has that discussion with Neo, and when he has that discussion with Trinity's character. And then in the end, and then he's two-timing them, and he waits till they're all vulnerable, and then he tries to kill him. He's not brave, he's not skilled at anything, he's just a manipulator, and he's a psychopath. So when I hear of a media portrayal of a psychopath, the first person I think of is Cypher from The Matrix, not Wolverine and not Hannibal Lecter.